Hey, Larry.
Oscar,
Hey, what's going on,
how's it
Janine?
going?
Right here. I'm over here. I see Chris is on. I see Larry. Larry Ariola's on. Right,
Yeah,
Larry, can you hear me?
yeah, we can hear you.
I can hear you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that hat. That's the hat.
I should put on my Long Beach hat. I'm just
What
kidding.
does it say? What does it say on the top of the hat? Does it say Santa Monica Looters?
Hmm.
Oh, okay. No, it just says Santa Monica.
Or-
Anyway, hi Janine.
Hi.
Everything's working. So we have the ability to ask questions on chat, right?
Yep.
Okay. So we just have to remind everybody about that.
Yeah. So we got some more people coming on, and then once we have our at least our first two speakers,
Yeah.
then we can get started.
Sounds great.
There you go. Here comes the party.
Yes.
I like it.
This is the new, I hope this isn't the new normal.
It is the new normal.
Yeah, I know it is, but I miss meetings. You know, I'm an extrovert, so I like seeing people in person.
You know,
It
I
could
thought I was
be.
an extrovert until all this happened, and
Yeah,
Zoom's okay with me right now.
yeah.
Well, welcome everybody. As we get our speakers on, we will begin in just a few minutes, just giving everybody an opportunity to hop on. See, we've got Sue. Thanks for joining us. Let's see.
Oh, and I'll unmute. There we go. Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Let's see.
What's happening?
Well, everybody's coming in muted, and we're going to wait for Lonnie and Lane to get on. Give them a few minutes. It just hit 4 o'clock.
Lane's going to be late. She told me last night she wasn't going to be here till 5.
Oh, okay.
She was giving a speech to the something.
Okay.
Sorry. But I could be wrong. I'm often wrong.
That's okay. No.
But I don't know where can you guys see me? Because it looks like I don't have a camera.
No, it's got a little picture, like a little rainbow photo.
I don't know what that is, but hold on, let me see. Since every other thing is coming up now as I do this, right? I'll figure it out.
That's okay. Take your time. You're not, we don't have
Trust me, I will. You can still hear me, right?
We can hear you, yeah. Great, we've got about 17 people on. We've got Lonnie on. Great to have you join us, Lonnie.
Oh, there I am.
There you are. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, Sue.
So
hi, how's it going, guys? I'm sorry, it took me a minute to get myself together, but now I'm a little more.
You're okay. It's only 4:01. You're doing good.
Wow, better than usual.
There you go. Especially in today's, I mean.
Well, this has been a rough.
It has been.
I've been out of my house for 3 months, so.
Oh, wow.
Michael will vouch for that because he's my gatekeeper.
Yeah, we did our cleanup the day after. It was definitely weird to be around so many people, you know? It's like,
yeah.
Oh, okay.
Oh, it must have felt I really wanted to go too, but you know, I had a stem cell transplant. So I'm in one of those big risk categories.
Yeah, you've got to be extra careful.
I do. I mean, so I have 3 brothers and even they thought, and they're reckless. So when they thought I should be careful, I took it more seriously than when Michael, who's always cautious, thought I should be careful.
That's great. Well, it's glad to know you're being safe.
Well, thank you. You too.
Absolutely. The party just keeps rocking. We've got 30 people on. I believe we've got Lane on now. And guys, you're free to make changes to your name if you've come in with a computer name, or sometimes people use different people's accounts. So you are free to, just in the top right corner of your video, there's a couple dots there. You're free to put your name if you want.
Thanks. Janine, can you hear me? I sometimes have trouble with my audio.
I can hear you.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Hi, Elaine.
All right.
Sue. Hi, Oscar. Nice to see you.
Hey, Oscar. I just saw Maria, but right? First it was Maria and then, there we go. So should I just put Michael next to me and then we can do what you guys are doing? What do you think? No?
However, Maria's telling me what to say, just to let everybody.
I was hoping Michael might tell me what to
news?
say.
You think that's
That
news?
would be really good, yeah.
If anybody
Go
thinks
ahead.
you will be listening to me,
Yeah.
think of me.
What's up?
Two heads are always better than one, right?
There you go. All right, we still got people coming in, and Michael is kicking us off. So really, whenever Michael decides, you're free, Michael, to kick it off. And we've got all of our speakers are on. Lonnie,
Yeah.
you're here, right?
It's Chris. Janine, I think it's Chris that's kicking us
Chris,
off.
why did I say Michael? Chris. Chris,
Chris, you better not kick me off. Can you hear
I'm
me?
here.
Always.
we still have people trickling in, but it's we've got all the panelists, so it's up to you on when to begin.
Where's Michelle, Chris? Is she right next to you? Like, see, I think I should move Oscar. I mean, move Michael.
Oh, I lost it.
I have to do down here somewhere.
Chris, can you hear us? We can't hear you, just so you know. No.
He should check his mic. This happens to me. If he checks the mic, there may be two sources. He knows this better than I do. So.
Well, I could hear him earlier when he got on. Let's see.
There
it is.
you got it?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. How is everyone?
Good.
Good.
Okay, are we ready for the introduction?
Yeah.
I think so. 4:05.
Okay.
Everyone on? Go for it.
It's good to see everybody. These are extremely interesting times. I hope everyone is well. I'd like to thank everybody for making it here. I'd like to welcome all our officials. Lane, is Kevin going to be here today?
Yeah.
I saw him. There he is.
Okay. Welcome, Kevin. Welcome, Lane. Welcome, Sue. I saw Larry there a little while ago. Hey, Larry. Okay, so let's get started. I'd like to hand this over to Oscar De La Torre, Chair of the PNA Association. Take it away, Oscar.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Chris. We want to thank everybody, all the participants. We know that this is all a sacrifice of time, and we really appreciate your time. We also want to thank all the elected officials and our city manager, Lane Dilk, who's on the call, city council member, Sue Hemmelrich, and also our mayor, Kevin McEwen, is on this call. And we also have different commissioners that are on the call as well. Mike Soloff is on the call. And let's see, who else, if I can see, is there anybody else in terms of the city?
I saw Jim Reese, Oscar.
That's right. We have a planning commissioner and Pico neighborhood resident, Jim Reese, who's also on this call as well. So thank you all very much for your participation. You know, it's been very, very difficult. All that we went from quarantine, right, for the pandemic, COVID-19, to curfews. And that is probably unprecedented in the history of our country, at least in recent memory. And so there is a lot of stress in the community. We understand that. We know that there's a lot of sadness, a lot of hurt, a lot of anger. just a mix of emotions that people are going through, that our residents are experiencing right now. And we just, we know that we have the ability and we have the power, and definitely in the city of Santa Monica, we have shown, that we are resilient and that we can overcome a lot of these challenges. And that's part of what we want to accomplish today through this town hall meeting, this virtual town hall. It's our very first Pico Neighborhood Association town hall. And part of our goal is to get residents more engaged, especially in the Pico neighborhood, being that it is a historically segregated part of the city, most marginalized. I think arguably, a community that has gone through a lot of stress and challenges, from gang violence in the 80s and 90s, and to gentrification now, environmental justices and so forth. So we want to engage all residents in the city of Santa Monica, but in particular the Pico neighborhood, because of the different demographics and the challenges that we have faced historically. And we know that from all the data that we're seeing from COVID-19, that it's communities of color, it's low-income communities of all races, of all racial backgrounds that are being hurt the most, that are being infected the most. And of course, the other issue that we're facing right now, it's someone said the other day, we're facing two viruses, both man-made. One of them, we can argue about how you feel about COVID-19, but definitely racism, the issue of police brutality is something that has been around with us for many years and impacting people of color, in particular men of color in low-income parts of the city. And so we want to address those issues. Today, I think, is a very important moment for us to reflect on how we want to move forward. And the only way that we feel that we can really move forward is with resident engagement. We want our residents to be involved. Really quick, I just want to say one of the things that the Pico Neighborhood Association is doing, and I'm so proud right now, I just left the Pico Youth and Family Center. We had a family come and donated a lot of food because they know that we're doing the We Care packages. We're supporting our seniors, our most vulnerable seniors and families in need. We're delivering essentials and food items to them every other week. This Sunday will be our 4th round of support for these families. And so we want to let you all know that the Pico Neighborhood Association is leading that project, and we have families donating and sponsoring this effort. And so we're very proud that our own community is stepping up to do that. So if anybody wants to volunteer and get involved, there are definitely ways that you can make an impact in their community. And the last thing I want to say is that there is a lot of uncertainty, there is a lot of fear in the community, there is a lot of struggle going on right now. And these are uncertain times, but one thing that is certain is our resolve to make social justice, to make racial justice, economic justice a reality in our city. And we're going to work hard towards that. So it gives me great pride to introduce our facilitator for today, Janine Pierce. Janine is someone that I've met on the picket line. Janine has always been a social justice activist, a warrior for the people, a champion of labor and working men and women throughout Los Angeles. And most recently, she's been serving the city of Long Beach on the city council. So she was elected to the city council in Long Beach, and we thought that it would be appropriate to have a current council member facilitate this first PNA Town Hall Zoom meeting. So thank you very much, Janine, and take it away. You're our facilitator, and we have all faith and confidence in your
Sure about that? I don't have much faith in my abilities today after the week we've all been through, but we'll give it our best shot. Thank you, Oscar, for inviting me to facilitate this. As Oscar mentioned, I'm a city council member in Long Beach, and like many cities, we're part-time, and so we're always trying to find ways to make sure that we support communities in any capacity that we can. And my background was working with a nonprofit for 10 years that did public policy advocacy work. So I know how important it is that we work together with community members and that we work with our elected officials, people that are administrators, and really trying to find a path forward. And while I'm not in Santa Monica, I definitely feel your pain. Long Beach experienced not only COVID to an extreme, but also looting and, the aftermath of systemic racism. And so I am honored to be here today to facilitate. And as a local elected leader, I'm always reminded, especially right now, as a white woman that's elected, my privilege and how hard it is sometimes to be quiet and listen. And so if you're an elected official today that's on this call, I know that you already know this and feel this in your heart, but really today, from what I've talked about with the organizers of this meeting, it's about listening. And so we're gonna go through, I'm gonna introduce our speakers. We're gonna talk first about COVID, and then we will go and talk about what happened this weekend, and that will free up Lonnie to leave the call after that, unless you want to stay, because we know that personally what we've seen is that the impacts of looting and of racism have a trauma impact on us. And so if you want to stay on the call, you're very welcome to do that. But we're going to start now by introducing Lonnie Russer. She is our health program analysis at the County of LA Public Health. Thank you so much, Lonnie, for joining us. Also joining us is Lane Dung. I tried to pronounce it before I got on and I had it. So thank you for joining us. And you are the interim Santa Monica City Manager. Great to have you with us today.
Thanks.
Thank you. We've got Sue, our Hemrick, our Santa Monica City Council member. And as was mentioned, Kevin McEwen, our mayor for Santa Monica.
We're
So
challenging you with unpronounceable names. I'm sorry.
I'm terrible. I'm so tired. I think I'm on like 3 hours of sleep. So you guys are lucky I'm still here. So we'd first like to hear, I think it'd be appropriate just to hear from our health professional in the room first. What is happening right now with COVID? What are the numbers looking like? What can people do, particularly after going through protests and people being around each other? And so we're going to kick it to you first. And guys, the rules for the road today are we've got a group chat. You guys are free to put your questions in the group chat. I will try to facilitate and get to those group questions. Oscar is going to quarterback me in case I miss something. You're going to shoot me a text or an additional message. And we'll make sure that we kind of go through this. We've got the first 40 minutes to talk about COVID. If you guys want to spend that 40 minutes doing that, we can. If you want to move on to the next topic, this is your guys' meeting, okay? Okay, go ahead, Lonnie, go ahead.
Great, thank you all so much for having me. So I am a health program analyst for the Department of Public Health in West LA, and my role is primarily community engagement. So it's really nice to be with you all here today. I hope our relationship can extend after this meeting and that I can be a resource to all of you for your public health needs going forward. So I'm here today to represent the department and provide updates on the current status of COVID-19 in LA County and our current health officer order. I'd also like to provide information on ways we can all stay safe. And I'm hoping to take a few moments to share too about the 2020 census and also the public charge rule and how that dovetails with COVID. So as we all know, COVID-19 is an illness caused by the novel coronavirus that can spread from person to person. The symptoms can range from mild or no symptoms to quite severe illness. There's currently no vaccine to protect against COVID-19, and so the best way to protect ourselves is to avoid being exposed to the virus that causes COVID-19. So right now, as of today, in LA County, there are 58,234 cases of COVID-19 in LA County, which is a very large number, and it's still growing every day. There are 2,489 people who have died from this virus since the start of the pandemic. These are cumulative cases, and on our website, there's a lot of information that shows cases day by day, how it's increasing, and also how the number of people who have died are increasing. Our website, for your reference, is publichealth.lacounty.gov, if you haven't been there yet already. So based on what we know, and I'm sure you're all aware of this already, those who are at high risk of severe illness from COVID-19 are people 65 years and older, and people with certain underlying medical conditions. particularly if they're not well controlled. Also, people who live in nursing home or long-term care facilities are particularly vulnerable to COVID-19 and severe illness from the disease. So symptoms, when we first started out on this journey, the main symptoms were cough, shortness of breath, and fever, and they've since been expanded to chills, repeated shaking with chills, muscle pain, headache, sore throat, and new loss of smell or taste. LA County has worked really hard to improve testing to make it widely available. We recommend that LA County residents who want to get tested first connect with their primary care provider and make that connection with their primary care provider or their health center and to try to get tested that way. And if they don't have a health provider, we have testing sites around the county that provide free testing for anyone with symptoms and people who are asymptomatic and over the age of 65, those with chronic medical conditions who are asymptomatic, and essential workers. Testing is also underway at all congregate living settings for both symptomatic and asymptomatic residents and staff. There have been some temporary schedule changes and closures of test sites due to the activity over the last few days, the protests and the countywide curfews. But anyone scheduled to have a test at one of these sites will be notified before of any conflicts or changes to their appointment. The closest testing site to your neighborhood is Santa Monica College at the airport location. It's currently open today. Not that any of you are going to get tested today, but it closes at 5. And so information on that is available at covid19.lacounty.gov/testing. So I also want to talk about the health officer order. The Safer at Home health officer order was first released in March in order to slow the spread of COVID-19. It's a legal order released by the LA County Health Officer, Dr. Muntu Davis, to help slow the spread of COVID-19 and protect the most vulnerable members of our community. The order is in effect until it's extended, expanded, or updated to protect the health of the public. It was most recently updated last Friday, May 29th. It's important to understand that although we've made progress in slowing the spread and we're on this road to recovery, residents should continue to stay home as much as possible, and COVID-19 still does represent a significant threat. We also must continue to do our part. Another reason we need to continue to slow the spread is so that we don't overwhelm our healthcare system. If you'll remember, a few months ago, flattening the curve was a big topic of conversation. We have flattened it, and we want to continue to flatten it and not overwhelm our healthcare system. So the stay-at-home health officer order requires people to remain at home as much as possible, but allows them to leave their homes for specific activities, including getting healthcare, going to work, getting goods or services from businesses, doing recreation outside, like physical activity, caring for vulnerable individuals, and people who are age 65 and older should and have underlying health conditions should really try to stay at home as much as possible and only leave for necessities. And even for food, it's recommended that you use some kind of delivery service or have community involvement in helping people get the supplies that they need. The latest order that was released on Friday adds additional things that are now open or have the option to be open. These include on-site dining at restaurants, barbershops and hair salons, houses of worship, non-essential office work settings, though telework is still strongly encouraged, in-store shopping at retail establishments, including indoor malls and shopping centers, flea markets, swap meets, and drive-in movie theaters. It also allows for pools, hot tubs, and saunas in multi-unit residences or part of homeowners associations to open. Public pools are still closed. Each sector that is opening has very specific guidelines that we've released that are all on our website for how to open. And so houses of worship, for example, have a several-page checklist that they are encouraged to go through and post at their facility, at their site, to show how they're implementing infection control and physical distancing measures. So for instance, at houses of worships, in-person attendance is limited to 25% of room capacity or 100 individuals total, whichever one is smaller. And these might change over time as we learn more about the disease, as we track how things are going with opening up. So there's a lot at stake, as we all know, I'm sure, as we reopen. More people being around one another can result in more transmission of COVID-19, more cases, and likely more hospitalizations and deaths. This is why it couldn't be more important for us to take care of each other when we're out of our homes. Face coverings and physical distancing are required if you are or may be in contact with other people. That includes at peaceful protests and our demonstrations. The reopening protocols, COVID-19 surveillance, a very interactive surveillance dashboard, and our roadmap to recovery are all available on our website. Again, it's publichealth.lacounty.gov. As a reminder, the virus spreads from person to person from close contact, which DPH considers to be being within 6 feet of another person for more than 10 minutes. In a healthcare setting, it's a little shorter time frame, but that's what we in the community consider. So how to protect yourself. I'm sure you've all heard this before, but it doesn't hurt to hear it again. Stay home whenever possible. Wash your hands often with soap and warm water for 20 seconds. If soap's not available, hand sanitizer is a good alternative, but water and soap is your best bet. Avoid touching your eyes, nose, and mouth with unwashed hands. Keep space between yourself and others, 6 feet apart, which is about 2 arms length. If you have any of the symptoms that I mentioned above or already, stay home, including isolating from other members of your household. Clean and disinfect frequently touched surfaces, door handles, phones, railings, and call your health provider if you have concerns about COVID-19 and your underlying health conditions. Call your provider also if you feel sick. And if you don't have a health provider, 211 is a great resource that can connect people to services. Wow, I just noticed all the chat. I'm going to keep going and we'll circle back to that. So neighborhood connections, so important. These are some ideas for how we can all be helping each other. So if you're not in a vulnerable category, it's a great idea to offer to help seniors get the essentials they need. And it sounds like your community is already doing that. Check in on people often. We're encouraging social distancing, but not social isolation. Or physical distancing, but not social distancing. We really want to stay connected to our people, especially those who are seniors and in vulnerable categories, to make sure that they still feel connected and that their emotional well-being is taken care of. There's also a countywide service called Critical Delivery Services that's run by the Workforce Development, Aging, and Community Service. That website is wdacs.lacounty.gov. And that's all I have to share about that. Thinking about cases at congregate living facilities. Congregate living facilities have been particularly hard hit by COVID-19, as I'm sure you've all heard about. I think last time I saw it, it was 53% of the deaths that we've experienced in LA County are from congregate living facilities. There are a few reasons. One is that staff may be asymptomatic and going to work and spreading the virus. And many people who live in these settings are vulnerable to the virus. They're in those vulnerable categories I mentioned earlier. And also there's many people who are living there. So if you're in a place with 20 people, there's more risk of exposure than if you're in a household with 2, right? It's just a numbers game. So there was a separate health officer order that was released April 24th, 2020, addressing transmission of the virus in licensed congregate healthcare facilities. The health officer order calls for several changes to facility functioning in order to stem the spread of COVID-19. So some of these measures are limiting entry and access to this facility only for residents and staff, so no visitors at any of these facilities, directing employees who are symptomatic or have tested positive to stay home and not return to work until 10 days after the onset of symptoms and 3 days after you're symptom or fever free. They've suspended all community dining, so clients are now fed in their rooms. And they've been encouraged to maintain separate areas. So once a resident tests positive, they're isolated to a certain part of the facility, and only certain staff are allowed to care for the patient there. And and staff caring for sick patients aren't then caring for well patients. We've also since implemented pretty extensive testing at all of our congregate living facilities for all of the staff and all of the residents, symptomatic or not. As far as communities around congregate living settings, as long as you're not interacting with people with residents who are symptomatic, there's no risk to the community for spreading COVID-19. So if we're all staying in our homes, if we're all maintaining our distance, wearing our face coverings, washing our hands, like if my neighbor has COVID-19 and we don't interact and we don't touch the same surfaces, I won't get it from her, right? It's about being within 6 feet of distance and having a droplet from an infected person enter the mucous membranes of a non-infected person. And mucous membranes are the nose, mouth, or eyes. In terms of data, there's a plethora of data on our public health website, publichealth.lacounty.gov. We have information at the countywide level for race and ethnicity and demographics for both cases and deaths. Unfortunately, due to privacy concerns, we aren't able to break it down further by community. And due to the widespread nature of COVID-19, we should all be acting as though everyone outside of our household who we come in contact with could have the disease and spread it to us. That's why we keep emphasizing physical distancing, hand washing, and wearing face coverings and other infection prevention measures. While I'm on a roll, I'll just talk very briefly about the public charge rule and how and COVID-19, and also give a plug for the census. So as you may probably know, public charge is a test used by immigration officials to decide whether a non-citizen will likely rely on the government for support. This decision is made when an individual applies to enter the US or to adjust their status to become a legal permanent resident, also called a green card holder. Immigration officials took look at many factors during the application process, including the applicant's age, health, finances, and education. They also consider whether the applicant uses certain public benefits. And so in February 2020, a new rule was passed that allowed for certain non-cash benefits to be counted under the public charge rule. This includes CalFresh, what many of us know as food stamps, Medi-Cal, Section 8, and public housing. However, for COVID testing, getting tested or treated for COVID will not affect anyone's immigration status. Medical information is confidential and stays between a doctor and the patient. And the doctor cannot share it with immigration officials. In addition, the federal government has stated they will not consider coronavirus testing or treatment in the public charge test, which is great news. For specific questions on immigration and the public charge rule, I welcome you to visit our Office of Immigrant Affairs. That website is oia.lacounty.gov. And I can provide a phone number, but it's on the website, and that's a bit easier. So lastly, the 2020 census is happening now. It was extended to October due to everything that's going on. The census is a national population count that takes place every 10 years. LA County's goal for the 2020 census is to count all of its residents, no matter their age, race, ethnicity, or citizenship status. Information provided by completing your census helps to decide how much federal funding we get for schools and classrooms, hospitals, clinics, affordable housing, roads, etc. It's very important. We're starting an educational campaign, and I'd love to reach out with those materials once we get that underway. That's all I have to share so far. What questions have come my way?
Thank you. So I think there's someone posted the link for the health dashboard around the data.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. There's a question about the types of tests. So I know that there's several kinds, and then there's the antibody test. Curious to hear what the county thinks about those tests. So go ahead.
Great. So they serve different purposes. There's what we call a PCR test, also called a molecular test. And that's done either by a nose swab or a mouth swab. And that's looking for active virus in your body right now. The second type of test is an antibody test. And that looks for antibodies or serology or antibody test. And that looks at whether your body has produced antibodies to the virus. So whether you've had it at all. And we don't yet know too much about whether that means that you can't get it again or how that plays out. But a lot of research is being done by USC and UCLA.
Great, thank you. And then I know that people asked about demographics on Latino, African American, and they've listed that. Did you say you can do it based on region? So does the
We don't
county
have it? It's countywide. Yeah, due to privacy concerns and HIPAA, once you get down to a small sample size, you really can't share information like that.
Well, I will give some feedback that Long Beach has done it by 5 different regions in the city. So we're able to tell. We pushed really hard to do it. But we did it based on that. We gave it a range. So we were able to say like under 30 or over 30. And that way we were able to kind of keep some privacy issues. But anybody at the county that's interested in changing some of that, or for cities, since we have city officials on here. So would you have numbers for Santa Monica or no, you don't?
Did I say how many cases there were in Santa Monica, or did I forget to say that?
I didn't hear it.
There are 284 cases in Santa Monica, and there have been 19 people in the city that have died. Now, that includes that's everyone whose address is in Santa Monica, right? So if you're at a long-term care facility with the address in Santa Monica, that would be counted as a case or a death in Santa Monica. If you are a staff who has a different zip code, that probably wouldn't be counted.
Okay.
And
then let's see. That's a question about the other. So there's a question about testing that's happening in Santa Monica. You mentioned at the beginning Santa Monica College. Are there other testing sites that you're aware of that are popping up in Santa Monica? I think I heard one about Malibu, but if you could elaborate.
That's all I've seen on the county website for testing in Santa Monica, but I encourage you to go to that website. Again, it's covid19.lacounty.gov/testing. And I know some community clinics and healthcare providers and like Kaiser, for instance, are also doing their own testing.
Great. And Lane, I saw that you unmuted. You might know better if you guys are working to get testing sites.
Yes, so we have walk-up testing at Santa Monica College, and then the county also has the West LA VA site for drive-up. So just as Lonnie said, you can go through their website, and we really appreciate, I want to say publicly to Lonnie and the Department of Public Health, we really appreciate having that close testing. That is a priority. It's free and great. I've been to West LA myself for a negative test. I was pleased to see, but it's easy, it's accessible, and we do encourage everybody to use it. So, and thank you, Lonnie.
Yeah.
Right.
And just to clarify, that is the PCR test. So that's looking for active virus in your body. It's not the antibody testing. I don't have resources right now on how to get the antibody test.
Right. And as you mentioned, the antibody test, there's not proof yet that just because you test positive for that you might not get it later. And so it's really important for people to not have a false sense of safety there. So
Right.
Oscar, oh, go ahead.
And I just want to say that also, if you have symptoms that are consistent with COVID-19, you should be assuming that you have it and follow the isolation procedures that are on our website.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and I think that the recommendations I've also seen out, because we've had so many people participating in protests that have been quarantining, is if you participated in a protest or cleanup for your neighborhood, smart to quarantine for the next 14 days so that you can make sure if something did get to you that you're not spreading that. So go ahead, Oscar, your turn.
Yes, thank you, Lonnie, for all the information and for your participation today. There was one concern that I wanted to bring forward. There were rumors circulating in the community that in the Pico neighborhood, we have the Hershon Manor, which is right on 19th and Pico and Santa Monica. And there was rumors going around that there was an infection cluster there of residents, who are in rehabilitation, for mental illness. And so there was concerns because there was a lot of people congregating and they weren't practicing the social distancing and all that. And we just wanted to hear back from the Department of Public Health in regards to the concern at the manor or any other social service where there's potential, higher incidence of infections and so forth. Do we know anything in regards to the manor, or if there is a possible infection cluster, and has that been looked into and has that been addressed?
My understanding is that there were a case or two there, and it's no longer listed on our website as a place where we're actively investigating a case. So I think that there are no more cases there. I'm not, I'm more on the community engagement side. I'm not a public health nurse. I'm not a provider, so I'm not always privy to the institutions where there are cases. But we have them all listed on our website, and it's not currently listed there. I know it can be concerning to see people not following the rules, like especially for me as someone who is staying home and not, practicing physical distancing and just being very aware and very conscientious. It can be really hard to watch people not be. But everyone has a choice to make in how they are proceeding with their lives. And I know it can be disconcerting watching neighbors, for instance, not practice physical distancing or wear face coverings and do these preventive measures that I'm talking about. But as long as we're all staying away, we're protecting ourselves from that. Do you have more questions on that? That's it.
I would also elaborate and ask the elected officials here or Lane, what are your guys' protocols within the city of Santa Monica whenever places are not following the health order? I don't know that answer, but I'm sure that yeah.
I can speak to that a little bit. Kevin and Sue, I can't see you, so feel free to jump in if you'd like. We have been reaching out to various institutions if we were concerned. Particularly, we've been reaching out to a lot of construction sites and trying to make sure that they're following the social distancing rules and that they're protecting their workers by ensuring compliance with face covering and social distancing requirements. We have also been reaching out to businesses. Our code enforcement groups have been out there trying to make sure that businesses that are not supposed to be open are not open. We're obviously now in phased reopening. And so now it becomes, if you're open, are you following the rules? For a long time it was, are you trying to operate when you shouldn't be open? Oscar, I was trying to look at the manor statistics for you. And it does look like that the manor, as Lonnie said, is in April and May not showing additional COVID-19 cases. It is one where we did reach out. And we've also been reaching out to nursing homes and rehabilitation centers that need support when we see the LA County numbers going up to offer city support. We're not responsible for their compliance, but we have reached out to try to provide the support that the city can provide.
Great, thank you for that. And then I had one other person that wanted to unmute and ask their question. Go ahead, dear.
Pretty much that was what I wanted to ask, a follow-up of what Oscar was asking, and Lane pretty much covered that. My concern is that, like the manor is, those people have a mental disability, so they might not understand to keep themselves, safe and practice social distancing. That's something that the staff there has to do, right? Like, how do we ensure that they're actually, making sure that the residents are following the social distancing?
Thank you for the question. I think it was great to hear that they didn't have any additional cases brought on. And Lane, I'm not sure if you're still muted.
Yes, I appreciate the question. We did reach out to them to try to make sure that they were taking appropriate measures. LA County also has been sending teams that are particularly skilled from their public health department. Lonnie, probably on the, I don't know if it's the enforcement side, but the compliance side, into various facilities, whether mental health or senior facilities, to try to make sure people know the rules and are following them for the protection of workers and residents and the community. So it's a great question.
Thank you for that. And do we have other questions? Yes, this is being recorded for those people that are asking. So know that it is being recorded. I'm sure Oscar and the team will share it with folks after the fact. I don't see other questions particular to COVID, but I'd like to at least open it up to our elected officials that are on the call. Kevin, if you'd like to go ahead and begin, if you have any comments, and then we can kick it over to Sue and anyone else that is on.
Well, on COVID, certainly the challenge continues to be to make sure that everybody takes seriously the possibility of transmission. When you wear a mask outside, you're not so much protecting yourself as you're protecting the people you're close to. You know, one of the fundamental tenets of Western philosophy is do unto others as you would have them do unto you. And I hope people will be charitable enough and responsible enough to remember to wear a mask all the time. There was some confusing messaging at the front end of this epidemic about the efficacy of masks. We now know that they are important. We do have some people who philosophically reject the idea of being told they have to wear a mask. We will continue to educate and to encourage, and if we need to enforce. This is an important issue for our community, and one that I hope hasn't been overshadowed by the events of the past few days in Santa Monica. Yeah, we're coming back out of curfew, but we're going back into pandemic safer at home situations, and we need to remember that. The other thing I'd like to touch on before turning it over to Sue, Lonnie talked about the census. Let me ask the million-dollar question. How many people on this conference have filled out their census form? Well, I can't see everybody because some of the are not on, but that looks pretty good. But if you're one of the few who hasn't, look, that is how your voice gets heard. That is how the funding for the services you care about gets allocated. That's how you get Congress people in Congress. There are a lot of things that are dependent on that census, which is held only once every 10 years. So we can't afford to be distracted by COVID or by the unrest we've seen or by anything else. We need to make sure that we, our families, and our neighbors have all filled out that census form. Thanks.
And I think it's also important to note that there was a lot of debate around how the census would roll out with the our federal level, some of the changes that they wanted to initiate. And so there are a lot of people that are scared to fill out their census. And so make sure that you fill it out and that you get somebody else to fill it out for all those people that might be scared. So sorry to chime in. Sue, did you have any comments on either the census or COVID? I know that there are two questions that are popping up. So as you unmute, let me ask them about the city being prepared to talk about the interim ordinance, particularly serving alcohol from 8 a.m. to midnight. I'm not sure if that's in reference to the COVID interim, you know, how businesses are able to take out alcohol at this time, or that's in reference to something else. But go ahead, Sue.
Thanks, Janine. And I think you probably understand the pain that we're going through. And I want to express to everybody that this is very painful for all of us. It seems to be one thing after the other, as if the virus weren't enough. Then we have the financial crisis created by the virus, and then after that we have this terrible shooting and I'm sorry, terrible chokehold in Minneapolis, and now we have civil unrest, and I just want to say that I think that we feel your pain. We've certainly been feeling the pain ourselves. And Janine, you may understand when you ran for office, you didn't expect to be hit with this triple whammy.
No,
It's been, no, it keeps you up at night. And yes,
My
Yeah,
face isn't always this puffy. This is called
yes.
COVID and crisis mode. Yeah.
Right. So, and it causes sleepless nights, and it's hard because many of these are unnavigated issues that we as elected officials wouldn't have anticipated, and don't really have a roadmap for what to do. The one thing I can tell you is that when the COVID crisis hit, I looked at the 1918 Spanish flu pandemic, and found that similar to what's happening now, there were similar discriminatory results of that pandemic. It was very much like what's happening here. I'm aware of it. I know other people are aware of it, and we have to keep it in the back of our mind as we deal with any crisis we deal with in the city. So, look, I've been in for 3 months. I'm ready to pull my hair out.
It gets better.
It's what
Even
you
in the
mean
middle of
when you get to go out, right? Because I'm not quite there yet.
Yeah.
But I also have elderly parents who are in an assisted living facility in Baltimore. Who my dad was quarantined for 14 days because he had to go for blood transfusions. I mean, when you have a very large extended family, this is even more difficult because you have so many people to worry about, and add that to everybody who lives in the city. And I have to say, I'm in a pretty much a state of constant worry. Mm-hmm. So I'm thinking about all of you, and I'm accessible. You have my phone number. You can call me.
Great, thank you, Sue. I'm going to turn it back over to Lonnie. I just sent her one of the questions that was listed on here about the validity of tests, and I'm wondering if you could speak to that briefly before we continue on the agenda.
I actually don't have that information, but I can try to get it for you and circle back with Oscar. If someone's getting tested because they think they might have it, they need to assume that they have it, and assume that they haven't until they get that test result. And even so, if the test result comes back negative, they should talk to their provider if they do have symptoms about whether they should assume that it's negative or assume that it's positive based on their symptoms.
Be safe is what we're saying here, right?
Yeah.
Be safe. Okay, well, thank you so much for that. I don't see other questions as it relates to COVID. I would personally, I always, when we talk about issues like this that impact our mental health so much, could you share maybe the website or a place, and I'm not sure if you have it, but resources that the county has around mental health and trauma? Because I know our county supervisors have done a lot of work, and it really is for moments like this, whether you're a business owner that's gone through, having your place ransacked, or you're a community member that's been in your home for 3 months. Mental health is super important. So if you have anything to share on that before we transition to the protest, I'd love to have you share.
The resource that comes to mind off the top of my head is that everyone in LA County now has access to Headspace, the meditation app, for free. And so I don't know the website. Maybe you can go to headspace.com/LA County. Maybe it's lacounty.com or .gov/headspace. I can follow up with those details. But if you, what was that?
Just Google the words Headspace.
Headspace, LA County, you'll get there. And it might be that you just download the app and then put in your zip code or something. So that's a great resource, and I can follow up with additional ones.
Great, thank you. Nobody asked me for that. That's my trauma-informed hat on. Okay, hold on. Let me see Michael's question. The question regarding alcohol sales is related to the interim ordinance adopted to stimulate recovery post-COVID-19. So perhaps that is a Lane question regarding alcohol sales post-COVID-19. Do you have an update on that?
So the alcohol sales, I think you're referring to the emergency order that allows restaurants and other businesses to have alcohol sales by delivery and takeout. We've actually followed the California Alcoholic Beverages Control, the ABC regulations there. So for right now, that'll be in place in Santa Monica for as long as it's in place through the California ABC.
Great.
Does that answer the question?
Okay, great. So with that, we will transition to our next topic, which is the ongoing protests and looting. We know that Santa Monica has been one of the hard hit communities. We all watched it, and you guys are living it because it's in your neighborhood. So I'd like to turn it over to Lane with the interim city manager to kind of talk about the impacts. I think there's a lot of questions that have popped up here around policing and understanding strategy, as much as you guys can share that. And how are you preparing for any future activities?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I really appreciate the opportunity to be with you tonight. I don't want to talk too much because I do want to listen. I also want to provide the information that you want. So finding that balance there. The chief of police does want to join us. So I just texted her to say if she can. So you may see her pop on any moment because she would very much like to talk with you. So she should be joining us any moment, and I apologize for looking at my cell phone. It's making sure that she got the link and is able to join.
That's okay.
So Sue referenced earlier the historic times we are in. We are looking at multiple crises, and we do recognize that those crises are impacting people of color and our low-income community disproportionately. So we start with our public health emergency, COVID-19. And we know that people of color constitute many of our essential workers who are in the workforce out every day. And so one aspect of privilege in this environment is the privilege of staying home. And it is a real privilege. I was someone who was originally staying home, and now I'm coming in every day. And there's no question but that for people who are working in grocery stores, people who are healthcare workers, people who are healthcare workers in senior facilities. There was a devastating article in the LA Times about a woman who was working in a healthcare facility who died in Los Angeles. That was just positively devastating. The COVID-19 public health emergency is absolutely one of the many public health crises that is disproportionately impacting people of color and low-income communities. It is also very scary for everyone across the board, and it requires doing government in an entirely different way. It requires engaging in our civic life in an entirely different way. And that has been an extraordinary challenge. And as someone referenced earlier, just the mental health trauma of not being able to go out, or only being able to go out to perform a job that increases your risk of contracting COVID-19 and your families. That public health emergency then created an economic crisis on level with the Great Depression. So our, the unemployment numbers in the United States are historically high. I believe the highest in modern American history. And our economic output, our second quarter GDP numbers, reflect just devastating impacts. That also disproportionately impacts communities of color in the unemployment numbers and the ability to sustain unemployment over periods of time. I know the undocumented community was referenced earlier, and the ability to obtain aid, particularly given the public charge rule and other obstacles that the federal government has imposed to people being able to obtain aid. Then combined with that, you have the crises in city and state budgets, which also is a safety net question. So when city and state budgets are being devastated, and the federal government has provided some funds, but not nearly enough to make sure that city and state governments can continue their work and can continue to provide school district and other funds, that is another devastating impact. In the midst of all of that, you had an absolutely horrific and inexcusable action by a Minneapolis police officer in the killing of George Floyd. And that has set off unrest that I think we all know was present the whole time. So the protests are over George Floyd, and they are in his memory and in solidarity with his family. The protests are also, though, about the structural problems across our country. And that has created a situation where we then have thousands of people marching in the streets to express, not just to express, to demand change and to demand real and structural change. And in doing so, we then have, again, the public health crisis. So we have thousands of people in the streets, and we don't yet know how that will play out. But it also, in our community, has created another crisis in that we had a peaceful protest, and I'll let the chief speak to this as well, but we had a peaceful protest that included some agitators and people who would engage in unlawful activity, who would throw rocks and bottles at our police, and who would ignore an unlawful assembly order and other things, in addition to synchronized and coordinated looting that came in and capitalized on the moment of the protest. And that creates an extraordinarily challenging dynamic, created an extraordinarily challenging dynamic in our community, and required a balance between respecting the right of free expression and keeping people safe. And in that process, and in that challenging situation, we lost some businesses and property that then expand our the economic crisis that we are experiencing locally. And I think, because I want to listen and not talk later, the one thing I will add is it then requires us to come together as a community. So in some ways, there are moments when we are challenged as a small city. There are moments when we don't recognize we're a small city because we're Santa Monica and we have such an international imprint. This is a moment where we have opportunity by being a small city, because we can come together in forums like this. And we have opportunity as a small city to really see each other and hear each other, and to be with each other as we try to build ourselves out of this. And in that process, to rebuild in a way that integrates and really brings life to all of our community connections and everything that we are together. So I really appreciate the opportunity to be with all of you, because I deeply believe that this is a moment where we are very much all in it together, and that we build ourselves out together, and recognizing and seeing each other and doing that work together allows us to be Santa Monica in a way that is deeply special, that is unique, that makes us different from other communities, and particularly in the Pico neighborhood, that recognizes a long history, that recognizes the challenges of gentrification, and that helps us to work together to not just preserve our communities of color, but expand and amplify the voices of our communities of color, particularly in this moment when people are screaming in the streets for structural change, and feeling unheard. And so that is what I would say about sort of where we are as a community. And I just appreciate the opportunity to be with all of you and to hear from all of you.
Great, thank you. So some of the questions that are coming up on here, and did you say that the police chief was joining us?
So I know she wants to, and she's saying which link, which line. So let me try to get that very quickly.
Kevin, so the questions that we're going to have are around PD, so we will leave those questions for the chief. I think that there's some other questions in here around the budget, and the budget kind of oversees both of these concerns, right? Because you've gone through COVID, you've gone through the businesses just are going to need a lot of support, and really trying to understand where the city is with their budget and what people are looking at, what's going to be cut, how are those decisions going to be made. That is what I'm reading from these lovely questions. Yeah.
Well, Janine, before I start to talk about Santa Monica, I just want to acknowledge you. I was watching Sunday. I know your town had a horrible night too, and I really appreciate that you would take the time so short after that to moderate something here in Santa Monica.
Well, they asked me before this weekend, so they got lucky. And they're good friends, and I love Santa Monica. But yeah, it was largely our downtown, but I'm happy to be here with you guys. I know that we're both going through similar experiences, so.
And thank you. We'll leave that for the chief when she gets here. But the budget situation is another one of those ongoing tragedies that we return to. You know, as we get out of one emergency, we find ourselves still in another with coronavirus or with the budget. In Santa Monica's case, here's the simple truth. Cities can't spend money they don't have.
Yeah.
We're required by law to have a balanced budget. And we're also required by our city charter to adopt that budget by the end of this month. We have never had an economic collapse of such degree or such certainty as we've had with the coronavirus-related economic collapse we have seen. And as a result, we very suddenly find ourselves with a shortfall for the next couple of years of about $224 million in our city budget. Now, that means there are going to be services that we just can no longer provide, and employees we can just no longer pay. We can make adjustments. We're doing that now. We're still working on the budget. We're still negotiating with our bargaining units to see if some of our employees might be willing to take pay cuts or furloughs, which would mean that other employees might not have to go. But the sad reality is that even with all that, there's just not enough money to cover the level of services that we in Santa Monica have gotten used to. This has been a city that's been able to not only provide the basic city services, but pioneer all sorts of wonderful programs in mobility and sustainability and well-being. And some of those things are going to have to be put on pause. We have to rethink what our priorities are. To some extent, we have to reinvent Santa Monica. Now, I went on CNN. I had an opportunity last weekend and made a pitch to the federal government. The reality is we need help out of Washington because that's the one place that can do deficit spending, that can print new money. That money has not been coming through. We're working with all of our elected representatives, and the best indication we get is that money's not going to happen, at least not in time for this budget. So what we're looking at is a series of extraordinarily difficult decisions. I've been on the city council for a long time. A lot of these policies, a lot of these programs are things that I've championed over the years. These employees we're having to let go. These are people I know that I've worked with side by side on various issues. This is not an easy thing for the city to decide. And yet I know for residents, it's like, well, why are you doing this? Why are you cutting this or that? We have to take the dollars we have and figure out how to apply them to best protect and serve the people of our city. Now, we've decided on some priorities. We're going to make sure that the people most likely to get hurt get our attention first. The small businesses, the people who of lower income, the seniors. We only have so much that we can do. But for instance, we're going to continue our Preserve Our Diversity program, which pays for seniors to remain in their rent-controlled apartments. This keeps people in our community and the people who'd be at most risk of losing and who'd have no place to go if they lost their homes. We have put in a rent deferment program that means you don't have to pay your rent for 12 months after the emergency ends, and we don't know yet when the emergency will end. Now, at some point, all that comes due. So what we've also done is make a priority economic recovery. We want to get people back to work. We want to get our businesses working again. We need to get the money flowing in the economy, and particularly in the local economy. I'm not so worried about the big corporations with their huge big box stores. They're very well capitalized. It's the small businesses, the places along Pico Boulevard, Montana, Main Street, that are going to be hit the hardest. All of this was hard enough before we had the events of the last week or so. And it's going to become harder because we have a meeting on Tuesday night where we have to make some more tough choices. And then 2 weeks from then, we have to actually adopt the budget. And I'm sure you in Long Beach are facing the same problem. The money's just not there to do everything we used to do. So what we welcome is input from the community on what's most important. But keep in mind that every time you say you want us to restore this program, you have to be ready to say, and that'll mean letting go of that program, because we're now flat out of money to put around. It's not like we can paper all these programs with imaginary money. We're not allowed to do that. We have to have a balanced budget in just over 2 weeks.
Well, and I think that's the question for a lot of people, is like, how do we make up these decisions? So I've got another speaker on that I'm going to call on, which is Jeff Blake. Jeff, where are you at? Guys, I want to bravo on this meeting. You've already had 56 different people on this call, so good job organizing this.
Hi there. Yeah, thanks so much. One of the board members of PNA. I want to thank everyone for being on. One thing that I know we don't need to get too specific. I'm sure there's a lot of hard decisions to make when we look at the budget situation, but I want to put out one idea that might be low-hanging fruit, and that would just be to simply drop the expensive appeal of this California Voting Rights Act lawsuit.
Yes.
So just putting that out there, if you'd like to respond or not, but I want to make sure that that is noted as a potential savings right away. Thank you.
I'll just note that we did not institute that lawsuit. We were sued. We were defending what the voters of Santa Monica voted for a couple of times.
Okay. So I want to bring it back to the majority of the questions that we had on here regarding the protest and what happened this past week were around two things. One is how are businesses going to get support, and then how is policing planned, and what do we expect moving forward? Do we expect more looting? Do we expect more protest? And if so, what are the police strategies around that? So with that, I'd like to welcome your police chief. And because we already discussed my lack of ability to pronounce names today, I'm just going to say police chief. Welcome. Is she on?
Chief Renaud, are you here? I think she's here.
Okay, let's see.
Chief, can you unmute? Let's see.
Oh yeah, she needs to be unmuted. Everybody gets muted when they come in. Sorry about
Yeah.
that.
Can you unmute her, Janine?
Well, I don't see her name.
She may be in by a phone number if we can ascertain what that is.
Yeah. If she, oh, here we go. Nope, not her.
She's unmuted. I believe she's the last participant who joined.
Okay, let's see. She says she's unmuted. It puts him back in alphabetical order. So let's see. Please.
Oh, I just heard that I'm unmuted.
There you go.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Thanks so much for joining us.
All right. Yeah, thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
So, yeah. I don't know how this is being moderated. I'm sure that a lot of people are muted, but there's so much to talk about. If somebody could cue me up so that I can be as concise as possible and answer your questions.
You are queued up. So let me introduce myself. I'm Janine. I'm moderating today. We have had several questions pop up through our text group chat. And there are questions about like where police were during the protests versus the looting, how you guys decided where you would put your police officers, do you expect another round of protest, and do you expect another round of looting, and if you do, what are those plans? And just give us the overall picture, please. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, absolutely. First and foremost, I really want to support the men and women of Santa Monica Police Department who were in the field on Sunday and out working there in the field and putting themselves in harm's way to try and ensure community safety. With that said, I think the overall response of the Santa Monica Police Department had some individual successes, had some individual failures, and it's certainly not what this community wants, expects, or deserves. And SMPD, and I have to take responsibility for that, will work in the future to adjust to the tactics we saw in the field that day. I've been in law enforcement for 25 years. I've been in 29 years, and I've been in riot situations before and large protest situations before, and this one is unique in a variety of ways. But one of the most important ways is that we had a new tactic that got brought in with people that specifically scoured to see where protests were happening and see that police resources were tied up with agitators and violent protesters, and then specifically connected on social media and in a coordinated way came into the city in caravans of carloads specifically to loot. And that is different. I have been in riot situations that have turned violent because of heated emotions about the topic. But this particular focus on looting just to loot is something that we've been talking about in the county as a very new tactic. When Santa Monica Police Department went to assist Beverly Hills on Saturday night, we saw that this was a game changer. And my two captains called me late Saturday evening, past about 10:30 at night. We put together a plan, and I authorized overstaffing we were already overstaffed for that day because we had notification that there would be a planned peaceful protest at Ocean in Montana. We had also received notification that that protest had been canceled. But we looked at what happened in Beverly Hills, and even though at that time, through our intelligence network, we didn't have specific information that said they were coming to Santa Monica, but we looked at what happened in Beverly Hills and it was a bit too close. So we overstaffed, and then we overstaffed on top of that. When I got in on early Sunday morning, by about 12:15, our officers in the field were reporting in and they were saying, hey, there's something different here. We're seeing carloads of people coming in, and there's something different going on. We activated mutual aid immediately. We had resources from Culver City, Beverly Hills, Redondo Beach, as far away as Santa Barbara County Sheriffs, and we began to deploy into the field. There were peaceful protesters. As the crowd became more and more agitated, the peaceful protesters broke off, and we facilitated getting them back to Ocean in Montana, and they went north, or they walked on Montana, and we removed our resources there to begin responding to the looting calls that we were getting. We also had an extremely large crowd on Ocean Avenue that you can't see it from the media cameras, but they were throwing rocks and bottles at the police officers. They were firing M80s at them. They were breaking out car windows. One of my motorcycle officers, they tried to pull him off of his motorcycle as he drove through. And we were being overwhelmed by that crowd at that intersection. And so we knew that that crowd had violent intentions, and that some of them in that crowd, a majority of them in that crowd, would have been violent to other people had they not been contained. Even with that, we had resources, Santa Monica Place and 3rd Street Promenade, and my officers were making arrests for looting, but we became overwhelmed with the constant influx of additional suspects into the city via vehicle. SMPD was fully deployed. We were well overstaffed, thinking that we might have a peaceful protest. We completely overstaffed for that. And then it quickly turned into the overwhelming situation that we had. And we prioritized life safety. And in doing so, we still saved several businesses at Santa Monica Place and the 3rd Street Promenade. There was little damage there. And in doing that, we lost other businesses, 4th Street up to 10th Street. I know, because I was there with them, every police officer worked extremely hard that day, but I don't think there's one of us that wished or wanted to do more, be in more places. We'll be doing a debrief and a report and a review of what happened that day. There will absolutely be lessons learned. We will change and adapt, but I have to support the men and women of this organization that went out there on Sunday and gave it their all. With that said, I'm standing at my command post right now, and you can probably hear the sirens in the background. This is not over. If you're watching the news with what's going on from Newport Beach to the city of Los Angeles, this is not over. We have our command post set up, the ICS system established. We're in constant contact with our LA County partners, with the state. We're monitoring intelligence and adjusting our staffing for all the intelligence pieces we get about different protests or different possible acts of violence. We know that if there's a protest in the city, there are going to be people coming in specifically to loot. In no scenario do I, even with mutual aid deployed, have enough officers to stand and guard every business and never leave. And that's part of what happened on Sunday. Was we made arrests of looters in Bloomingdale's, then we got called to vans. And when we left Bloomingdale's, they went back in. And then when we left vans to go to Bloomingdale's, they went back into vans. And so and Santa Monica Place, I did talk to Julia Ladd Sunday morning, and she did try and fortify and put fencing up around her borders, but they just ripped it down. So to the extent that we partner with our business owners to remove merchandise, secure their businesses, we know it's a horrible look, but these are unprecedented times. And this multi-pronged crisis, going from COVID-19 to businesses that have already lost because of COVID-19 and people who have lost their jobs because of that, and pent-up frustration for being sheltered at home for so long with no outlet, combined with what happened to George Floyd, which none of us in law enforcement condone, and we share the sentiment of the injustice of his killing. And we have this crisis we have that some committed criminals are taking advantage of to come into every city around us and loot wholesale. So our plan moving forward is to adjust daily. I have to tell you, the community are the best eyes and ears. So I'm about 500 emails down, but I have one from Phil Brock because we got information of a planned protest at Santa Monica High. He sent me an email saying, hey, this isn't the Alumni Association, this might be a ruse. And you guys are probably allowed onto social media platforms that the Santa Monica Police Department is not. And if you guys are seeing chatter or hearing something that concerns you, I really need you to forward that to the police department. We act as best as we possibly can. And along with securing the liberties that Santa Monica wants to have and listening to our community and their needs. And we had a situation yesterday with a suspect, and it was a televised, well, you could hear the sirens in the background, and the police were trying to stop this subject. And dispatch called in and said, hey, his mom is on the phone and says that he's bipolar and he has mental health conditions and he's not going to stop for you guys. And so we're still trying to listen to our community and factor that in so that we provide the kind of principled policing and bias-free policing that SMPD is known for, that we pride ourselves on, and that our community demands of us. It's a very difficult balance, and we're going to have failures.
Thank you, Chief, for that. I want to respect the time that we have, and we've got a couple specific questions that I need to make sure that I ask directly. So I'll give you the toughest one first, and then we'll work backwards from that. How's that?
Sure.
None of us people in office are shy from tough questions, but there are several people that have asked a question about why police appeared to be gassing peaceful protesters while looting was going on. And I think you've explained the idea around not necessarily expecting as much looting and that the locations were spread out. But if you could just address that very specific question, because it's been asked by several people.
Yeah, that crowd was not peaceful. And you could talk to the officers who were pelted with bottles and rocks. They broke out windows. They burned 2 vehicles. And when some of the group got around the police officers, they went to the courthouse and vandalized it. So I was watching the media the same way that all of you were, and that was the only images that we had. And I completely understand what it looked like from the media perspective. But let me assure you, there were violent people in that crowd. And when they got around the police officers, they perpetrated violence in the city. we had citizens who were hurt. We, on a couple of occasions, we had to send in officers to areas that were surrounded by violent people to rescue these hurt individuals and bring them out so that fire could treat them. So there was a violent element there, and that's why that crowd was so large. And with what we had seen and what they had demonstrated about their violent intentions, had we just let that crowd go, they would have moved into the city and hurt people.
Mm-hmm. And I know that the majority of the cities, and I think you mentioned this at the beginning of your comments, there was peaceful protesters and there were looters. And I know from I went to our protests in Long Beach. I know that there's always a small group of people that kind of can be extreme, that cause pain for everybody. But the question more specifically is moving on to, if there is something planned for this weekend or the next week, are there practices in place that your police officers will keep, or are there going to be different tactics that community members can count on to keep themselves safe should they decide to attend?
So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to work harder to talk to the protesters as they gather, and have police officers there, not in riot gear, maybe, softer uniforms, bicycle patrol, and have them there to meet the people and say, please tell me who planned this protest. We are here to facilitate. Where would you like to protest? What can we do to make this safe for you? We're here to partner with you. While we're doing that, we're going to have other police officers in vehicles in the city actively looking for people coming in just to loot. There have been some specific vehicle tactics used by these people. They drive quickly and erratically and pull over to curbs to see, get up close and look at shops to see what's the window pane like, how accessible is the door to be breached. They make quick U-turns in the middle of the street. They caravan in 3 to 4 cars at a time. So we know what we're looking for in the tactics, and that's the way we'll approach it, is facilitate the peaceful protest and have all of our other officers driving the city looking for those signs and relying on what people call in and tell us they're seeing.
Great, thank you. And I know there were some comments around, I think some other places, I'm not sure where, have done checkpoints for key areas around freeways that are coming in. Is that a strategy that you guys are looking to employ?
So we employed that strategy on Sunday and then again on Monday, utilizing CHP to help us staff our areas. So yes, that's a strategy we would look at again.
Right. And then the other question is more in regards to the businesses. I mean, I know in Long Beach, we got Public Works out to help board up windows. You mentioned that you're advising businesses to remove any of their merchandise, put that in a secure location. Are there other things that the city is telling both businesses and residents to do to prepare?
I think you have a very good list there. I would follow it up with stay safe, stay alert, stay inside if you feel that you need to. And you bring up Long Beach, and I'm not, Long Beach got it really badly too. And if you live in that city, my heart breaks for what your home community is going through as well. The Santa Monica Police Department made over 400 arrests on Sunday. We made over 40 arrests on Monday, and we made over 20 arrests last night. We are active, and we know also that another technique of the looters is to come in and do prodding expositions in the city. And if they don't see a lot of police officers driving around, if they don't see a lot of interaction with us on foot, in cars, etc., then they think that we're weak and that we're porous. If they don't see easy targets on businesses, then they're going to move on because they're opportunists and they're just looking to loot. And if our city is a hardened target, they're going to go somewhere else.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. Let me take a moment just to make sure that there aren't any other ones specific. Okay, so I'd like to address some of the comments that are in here and that was mentioned early on is is everybody still on? Let's see. Is our city manager still on? My squares all moved around, so now I can't see. Let's see.
I'm here.
Beautiful, there you are. So you had mentioned earlier, and it's brought up in some of the comments here, basically that conversation around structural and systematic racism that we all know is why people are stronger in these marches and their activism today, because this wasn't the first time something like this happened. And we know that I like to say that it's not the responsibility of one officer as much as we need to make sure that we bring our officers through the justice system should they go outside what they should be doing. But it's not up to one officer, and it's not up to one police department. It's up to the structures that hold them accountable outside of that. And the question was raised of, what is the city of Santa Monica looking to do to talk about structural racism in your own practices, even though this was not a case that happened in Santa Monica? And really that question's for everybody. It's for the police chief, it's for the council members, the mayor. But I think that's really what a lot of people on this Zoom call would like to hear addressed, even if it's uncomfortable to talk about.
This is Cindy Renaud. Do you mind if I answer that one first?
Absolutely.
I'm appalled by what I saw. I'm appalled by the actions. I am appalled that people of color still suffer injustice at the hands of systems and of people. The state of California and California law enforcement is very far advanced. Those images that we saw came from far away with completely different training. In California, there is so much work to be done up and down the state, and I've worked up and down the state. I came to the Santa Monica Police Department because this department is progressive, and these officers believe in having this dialogue and making themselves better every day. We are a model for a class that's labeled principled policing. It's a certified class by our state agency, and not every police department does it in California, but we do. And it's our officers who are the teachers in the class to facilitate that dialogue. So what SMPD will do moving forward around this conversation is continue to foster relationships with our community, with people of color, and as soon as we get past COVID-19, have the face-to-face meetings that need to happen to continue advancing the principles of principled policing and procedural justice, and making sure that your police department is part of the equation that works for social equity.
Great. Thank you for that. Really appreciate that. And the comments too is, you know, as I mentioned, that it's within the police department, but structurally overall, and I'm not a Santa Monica expert. So I'm trying to synthesize about 6 questions here and the conversations I had before this to try to say, where's Santa Monica at in this? And we know that racism is not something that a lot of people believe that they feel, but that structures put things in place that sometimes maybe a community that doesn't have a lot of resources or has high number of undocumented immigrants, they don't want to call city services to get lights on their streets, you know, and therefore that neighborhood is darker, therefore it's more susceptible to crime. So are there things that you guys feel really proud about that you want to share with the people that are on this call, or are there things that you're looking to do in the future, knowing that you have a budget crisis and that everything is really crazy right now?
Yeah, so, you know, I think I can address a little bit of that, and I don't know if either the mayor or Councilmember Himmelrich want to jump in as well.
I would at some point, yes.
Yeah, I can say some of you know about me that I actually prosecuted Los Angeles Sheriff's Department members before coming here, and was part of the team that ultimately prosecuted Lee Baca, the sheriff, successfully. And I'm proud of that work. I believe in good policing. You will hear me support the men and women of the Santa Monica Police Department who keep our community safe. You can also have my assurance that I believe in accountability, and I believe that the city council and the chief do too. I think we also believe that we are a very strong police department and that we have great practices in place, but that this is a moment to hear from you and to continue that conversation. We're not done. Just because we're good doesn't mean we're done. And I think we heard the chief say that as well. On the budget, the council did take a number of actions to ensure that our community would be fed and would be housed and would have childcare in order to go to work, in order in the midst of a very severe budget crisis. And indeed, the needs of the undocumented community were specifically addressed by the council on May 26th with respect to housing. And Mayor, maybe I'll turn to you there.
I wanted to say that one of the early questions was, what were the policy contexts in which the decisions were made on Sunday? And many people have asked, well, why did you welcome that march to Santa Monica? Which we did. We had misgivings, but we totally supported that free speech expression. And that's because we, like you, are outraged at the murder of George Floyd and by the persistence of institutional racism, which is not necessarily something that in this case happened here in Santa Monica, but for which we understand we all bear responsibility for what our society at large does. So that was one of our principles. The other on Sunday was valuing life, and sometimes over property. Now, our chief has been second guessed about the tactics on Sunday, and she has said we'll have a full report. But if you look at the outcome of what happened on Sunday afternoon in Santa Monica, it's true that our police did not charge into the looters guns blazing, for good reason. The chief didn't mention how many there were. There were thousands of looters. We had about 60 police officers. We had some mutual aid. We called for the National Guard at 2 o'clock and they didn't arrive till 8 o'clock at night. So I guess we could have rushed in there and had a shootout in a shoe store. And instead of having our sidewalks littered with empty sneaker boxes, we could have had bodies on the sidewalk. That was not what we did. And that's because of a conscious policy on the part of the city.
Mayor, I want to really, really applaud you for those statements. Those are courageous statements, I think, that to really be able to say we chose people over property in a city like Santa Monica that's known for the glam. You're known for being progressive, but you're known for your storefronts too. And so I really applaud that and applaud your numbers. I mean, I'm somebody that's in government. Those are decent numbers considering what you were faced with. So
thank you for that. But really, it wasn't I who got to make the choice on Sunday. It was each and every one of our police officers who were being threatened, and not by everybody. I need to stress there were a lot of peaceful protesters in that crowd, a lot of my neighbors, a lot of Santa Monica residents, and many of them left before things got ugly and went back up Montana Avenue and dispersed quietly and peaceably into the neighborhood. The people who ended up at the pier at the end, it was sort of a distilled group of people who were hungering for confrontation and were triggering confrontation. And yes, our police officers were at that point under attack. To make that conscious choice while under attack, to use the minimum possible force, protect the assets of the city, and not go in to a situation where the streets had looters, but they also had a lot of innocent civilians, people who were there for the protest, people who just happened to be downtown. It was a really ugly Sunday afternoon.
Yeah.
But our chief and her police force kept it from being even more tragic.
Good work, guys. Really good work. I've got a couple questions. Some more questions here. I just listed the order that I was going to ask them. There was a question about pharmacies and people getting access to their pharmacies. Do we have a understanding if their pharmacies will be open, if they're drive-through, what that process might look like?
As far as I know, they are open during non-curfew hours. I know that some were not open on Monday morning. I went around our community Monday morning to see what was going on, and some of the pharmacies had been broken into, were damaged, and we're dealing with that. But as far as I know, we have no prohibition on pharmacies being open during.
I think from the looting, there was looting that happened at some of them that might have from this question?
Well, some people were looking for drugs, and I'm sure they found them.
Okay, so there's a lot of comments. So if I botched your question about pharmacies, repost it for me, please. You guys are fantastic. Okay, so pharmacies, let's see. I just listed, this is not context that I understand, but Jay-Z that was on here was asking questions about PAL and parks and child molestation. I think that might be a question for our police chief to be able to address that. And if you're on here, Jay-Z still, and you'd like to ask your question, I welcome that.
I actually think, Janine, it's more a question for our city manager than it is for the, who used to be our city attorney. So there you go.
Okay, go ahead, Lane.
Great. As many of you know, we had horrific allegations now 2 years ago that Eric Euler, a former city employee, had molested children, and particularly children of color, in our Police Activities League program in the 1990s and a little bit into the 2000s. Those allegations were devastating. I mean, just absolutely the worst of the worst for to have somebody say that that they were in a program that is meant to protect youth and that they were abused in that program. The city has settled the litigation with the plaintiffs who brought the lawsuits. And in that process, what we have also done is we have worked across our programs in the city government to make sure that our programs right now have in place best practices for working with parents and everyone else to identify any potential risk of child abuse activity and to immediately respond to that. So we did work, not just to look backwards, but to look at the city right now and to work with a group called Presidium that focuses on this nationwide, works with the Boys and Girls Club, the YMCA, University of California, and many, many others to make sure that we were putting in place the best policies, practices, and procedures to make sure that when children are in programs with our city, that we have in place the best policies for identifying, detecting, responding appropriately. So that's where we are on that. There's no question that was a totally devastating moment for our community. And the individual is no longer, Eric Euler is no longer alive and no longer a city employee. If anyone's not aware of that, I do want to let you know that.
Thank you. Thank you for that. I appreciate that.
Can I ask a question about that, if that's possible?
Sure.
I just wanted to have some clarification because every time I hear that specific situation talked about, the reference that's made as if that man was a current employee of PAL after the 90s. And to my understanding, I thought that he worked for the city at the time of his arrest and by then. So he wasn't literally at PAL.
That's absolutely correct, and thank you for clarifying that. If anyone doesn't know that, he at the time of his arrest, he was an employee in our Information Services Department. He was not an employee in the PAL program. And you're exactly right to point that out because this, it was incredibly devastating, particularly for our staff at PAL who work with kids every day and who want to keep kids safe. They were as or more devastated than anyone else by the whole situation.
Thank you for that. Okay, the pharmacy question is back. Thank you, Michael. Walgreens at Lincoln and Pico has not opened after being looted. What is the city doing to assure Walgreens that they can reopen their store and that their store will be protected? Anybody? Yeah.
Yeah, so it's a great question. We have been reaching out to affected businesses. But I'll tell you, I mean, this is one of the reasons it's so important for us to be in the community and on calls with all of you, because what I hear implicitly in that question is that that someone needs access to that Walgreens, and I think we had not yet focused on the need for pharmacies, or the possibility, for example, that that key pharmacies or many pharmacies were closed. It's true that they did seem to be a particular target of looting. But I will reach out to our emergency operations center and to Lisa Parson, who works with me and has been reaching out to many people, and see if we can check on Walgreens and CVS and some of our small pharmacies as well, to make sure that that we have pharmacies available for all of you.
Yeah, I know that that's super important. Is people that on that day might have been planning to pick up prescriptions, and now if they're still closed, it might have caused some more challenges for people. The other question is about curfews. So I don't know what it's like for you guys in Santa Monica, but in Long Beach, we'll say, okay, we're going to do whatever the county curfew is. And then 2 hours later, we release our curfew, and it's not the same as the county. And then everybody gets different notices, and every day it changes. So knowing that it seems like there was kind of like a day of calm. I mean, not for LA, but things are calmed down. But now there's more protests being planned. What is the city looking to do when it comes to curfews? And do you look at aligning those with the county, or what can community members expect?
Cindy, do you want me to take that, or do you want to answer it? I'm happy to. I'll talk unless you jump in. So the curfews are incredibly challenging. We recognize that they impact people's lives, that they add on to having had to stay home for so long. We heard from our healthcare providers at UCLA Health that they needed exemptions for people who were traveling to medical appointments. So we added that exemption today. We have no interest in these curfews being in place. Our community also was devastated by the looting that occurred, and the unlawful activity that occurred, and the dangerous activity that occurred on Sunday night. And while the Santa Monica Police Department, with mutual aid, responded to all of that, and we had no loss of life, we do also take that very seriously. So we know that there's continued that there are continued law enforcement reasons on any particular day to look to a curfew, and what we're trying to do is tailor very carefully the curfew to what's actually needed to keep the community safe. We did move to 6 p.m. with the county today, and that obviously has been successful. The county then moved theirs back, which surprised us, and we have not done that yet. But we are looking to. I mean, we want to get rid of that curfew as soon as we possibly can. We also need to keep this community, which was a target of a lot of unlawful activity, safe. And so it is. And we also hear you saying it's confusing and you're not announcing them fast enough. We've heard that loud and clear. We will try to announce tonight what the curfew will be for tomorrow. It is a really challenging dynamic. We've gotten some questions about, doesn't it curtail all freedom of expression? We would never do that. So the curfews, they are growing progressively later, but they have never been for all day. And I guess I should say we would never do that. I hope and pray we would never be in a situation where we were so concerned about human life that we had to have a curfew all day. Yeah.
Great, thank you. Two other housekeeping questions. One is City Hall, when is it reopening, and street cleaning?
So street cleaning started this week, and I know everybody's glad to see it again. I've gotten questions about individual blocks. I don't have the answers to those questions, but street cleaning did resume this week, and we are continuing that despite the activity of the last few days. I'm sorry, I'm tired. I've lost your first question.
Let me just jump in one additional piece on the street cleaning, because this will be important to people. We're cleaning the streets the first full week of each month because people have told us that's important to them. However, my understanding is that if you're unable to move your car because you're staying safer at home, or because of a curfew, or for any other reason, for the time being, at least this is my understanding, correct me if I have it wrong, Lane, but for the time being, you will not be ticketed for remaining in your space. We'll clean around you.
Okay, that's good.
Oh, you guys are nice. The other question was City Hall opening.
Yes, so we're looking at reopening plans right now. It will be a phased reopening. So if there are particular services that you need in City Hall in person, feel free to reach out to me by email, lane.dilg@smgov.net. We won't open everything because we, despite many people needing and wanting to get out for freedom of expression right now, we are still very much in a public health emergency, as discussed by LA County Department of Public Health earlier. So we want to keep everyone safe. So we're looking to reopen the services that people need in person and to maintain other services digitally. We also do want to try to find a way. We know there are members of our community that don't use online, don't have as much access to computers or aren't as familiar with that medium. So we are working to make sure that every member of our community can access the city services they need, but ideally not by bringing a whole lot of people into the same space.
Great, thank you for that. The other question that was on here, if our police chief is still on, it said of the arrests that were made over the last 2 days due to looting or assault with a deadly weapon, how many were related to curfew violations? Not sure if our police chief is still on.
Is the chief still with us? She may have had to.
It seemed like there were some busy things going on behind her. So perhaps you mentioned, or I think you both mentioned that you were going to put out a report. Did you want to talk to that? Sorry. Also tired.
We will provide after action briefing. We're looking at what the form of that is, given city resources, et cetera. So we will provide information, and I can take that question back and see if we can get that out to all of you, maybe through Oscar or someone else. I really regret this. I was supposed to be off with you at 5, but I didn't want to leave you so early, but I kept people waiting for 48 minutes now, and so I need to step off. I want to thank all of you. I can't see all of your faces, but I want to thank all of you for the opportunity to talk with you and to hear your questions. And we do want to hear from you. So we look forward to continued opportunities to answer your questions and to engage, not just in conversation, but in joint work together to move forward on some of the problems that are leading people to protest right now, and that we all need to work together on, as well as on our community's recovery and building toward the future. So thank you so much for inviting me. Thank you, Oscar, for inviting me.
Thank you for staying. Appreciate it. I feel bad. I didn't know she was leaving at 5. I just kept queuing her up. Okay, so let me see. Let me regroup and take a look at some of these questions. So right now, what we have on is we have our mayor and city council member. I think our chief is gone. So we've got 10 minutes until we're scheduled to be done. I think 5 minutes till I'm supposed to kick it over to Oscar. So anybody that, let's see, there's a question about homeless people. And where have they been receiving services? Where's the city working with them? Perhaps, Kevin, you'd like to tackle that as our last question.
Well, there's been a county-wide program that we're working with, recognizing that when you tell people that because of the coronavirus pandemic, they're safer at home, that's a bit difficult for people who don't have a home. We've been fortunate, there was a lot of concern early on in the pandemic that people who were unhoused would be super carriers and somehow spread the disease through the community, and that hasn't turned out to be the truth. In part, that's because working with the county, we have been helping people who are unhoused find temporary lodging in hotel rooms, motels, etc. We've had some difficulty with that here in Santa Monica because the county program is actually set up for larger motels than we happen to have. But no, that's where at least some of the people without homes have been, as we've gotten them temporarily into lodging that puts them into a safer situation. I spoke earlier about how we've had so many problems and emergencies piled on top of each other that we have to now recognize and accept that as each one is peeled away, we'll find ourselves back in the one that we had previously. You know, once we're stopped worrying about looting, we'll be back into the coronavirus pandemic. And even after that ends, we'll be dealing with the economic collapse that the pandemic has caused. And we'll be dealing with the reduction in city services that has made necessary. And we'll be dealing with the fact there are far too many people in Santa Monica and in LA County and in the country who are unhoused. We'll be dealing with the current administration we have running the country. There are going to be a lot of things we're going to find ourselves dealing with in the months ahead. It's not going to end soon. And I wish I could say it was.
Yeah. Thank you for that. I know the Project Roomkey has been a fantastic project, and comments on here are, you know, we were able to be creative. Let's keep up that creativity beyond this. And there was a question that I missed, and I think they put it on here twice. So I'll ask this question, then I'll send it to you. Oscar says, will the aftercare and camp programs continue at Virginia Avenue Park as part of the budget question? And
we've already prioritized those programs at Virginia Avenue Park. Now, obviously that doesn't make everybody in the rest of the city all that happy. Again, we have limited resources. One of the things we're working on right now that will come to the council on Tuesday night, and I can't tell you what it'll say because the staff report is not out yet, is how we can do better on those programs for children. So look to what comes out in the next couple of days, and we'll be discussing it Tuesday night.
Great. Well, I just want to thank you guys for asking me to be on and sharing this evening with you guys. It's your struggle is our struggle in Long Beach, and I'm happy to facilitate anytime. Sorry if I give my 2 cents a little more than a typical facilitator. I just can't help myself. So Oscar, take it away. Thank you guys very much again, Kevin and Sue, for also being on. Really appreciate it, and any commissioners that are on. Go ahead, Oscar.
We want to thank everybody for your participation. We want to thank all of our elected leaders, our interim city manager, our chief of police. We know she's very busy, and for her to take the time to speak with us and answer our questions. So thank you all, and thank you for all the participation. You know, we didn't know what the turnout was going to be, but we exceeded our expectations. I think it was a great turnout to have this first PNA virtual town hall. One thing that's real important, obviously, you know, it's sort of the elephant in the room, but we're adults, and one thing that I do want to, you know, we do have some disagreements, obviously, with our city government coming from the Pico neighborhood. But one thing I want to say is that we're not going to let the disagreements that we have to get in the way of us serving our residents, especially our most vulnerable seniors and also our children. And so the Pico Neighborhood Association will continue to work in partnership with the city as we work, you know, to address the longer term issues. And specifically, just so that we know what we're talking about, you know, where the disagreements are, you know, the California Voting Rights Act, the litigation, you know, that the Pico Neighborhood Association has initiated so that we can have fair representation, so that we can have district-based elections like many other jurisdictions, many other municipalities throughout the state. As many of you know, this litigation is in appeal. The city of Santa Monica has appealed the decision of the Superior Court, which rendered a decision on our behalf. The Pico Neighborhood Association won that case, and it's under appeal. So we don't know what's going to happen in the appeals court, and you know when that's going to happen. We thought it was going to be in July. We're not sure if district elections will be a reality for this election cycle, but it's something that we look forward to. In the meanwhile, we want to make sure that our residents are engaged so that we have representation. We have our city council. Today is one good example of our mayor and our city manager and our chief of police listening to the concerns of our residents. And our council liaison as well, Sue Himmelrich, you know, who is with us and communicating with us, and we hope that we continue that partnership as we work our way through these more larger challenges. We will continue to prioritize the services that our residents need, especially our most vulnerable residents. The other thing that we want to talk about in closing is that there is racial injustice in the city of Santa Monica. We can see it. I'm on the school board. I see it every time when we look at the achievement gap data, when we look at our South Side schools, versus our North Side schools, when we look at who's in honors placement and who's in advanced placement courses in our school district, we see the inequalities that exist. And so we're committed to addressing that. And I think, we need the city of Santa Monica to understand that when the Pico Youth and Family Center was defunded, at the same time, the Police Activities League was funded while there was an investigation, an open investigation on allegations of child molestation that later on proved to be true. That is a racial injustice. That is a serious racial injustice, and I hope that one day we can correct that. We will continue to fight. The Pico Neighborhood Association is one of the oldest neighborhood associations in the city of Santa Monica. We are dealing with a host of issues that other neighborhoods don't have to deal with, but we hope that we can count on our city leaders, as we did today, for them to listen to us and to take our concerns into consideration as we move forward with budget decisions. Diversity in hiring, that's another thing that's real important. We want to make sure that we have diversity in the staff. For example, one thing that we learned is that when the city was working on upzoning Pico Boulevard, we asked this question in a meeting. We asked the management in the planning department, the top administrators there, we asked, if they had a person of color, one person of color working on staff, and they said no. And yet they were developing plans for the Pico neighborhood and Pico Boulevard with not one person of color on their staff. And so we think that's a racial injustice, and we hope that changes. And I know that we are capable of making those changes, and we will continue to advocate for those changes, because what we are working for is an inclusive government. All of us represented, all of us working together. So with that, I want to thank everyone that came on this Zoom call today. We will be following this up. In fact, we're working on a 10-point plan right now as we speak to develop these concepts, these ideas for racial justice in the city of Santa Monica. We think racial justice, the solutions for racial justice should definitely come from people of color and people that live in the Pico neighborhood. I think that we have a lot to teach and a lot to give the city of Santa Monica when it comes to this topic of racial justice. So with that, I want to thank you all. I hope that you all stay safe. We want to stick to the timeline of today to let you all know that we will continue these town halls. We will do this more. If you have any suggestions in terms of topics or invited guests, someone said that we should have the school district, the superintendent, school board members on the next one. We are thinking of that, but we know that we're in crisis right now, and something might change tomorrow that will dictate the topics that we deal with. But with that, I want to thank you all very much for participating in the PNA's first virtual town hall. Stay safe out there. We are still fighting a pandemic, and we need everybody to stay safe and healthy. So God bless you all. And Janine Pierce, thank you. Thank you for supporting us and facilitating this first dialogue. Thank you to the Pico Neighborhood Association Board of Directors and all of our residents. We will continue our We Care packages. So if you know of any seniors or vulnerable families or families in need that need groceries, that need toilet paper or any other essentials, please send us an email at Pico Youth, that's PICOYOUTH, PicoYouth@gmail.com. And we will make those deliveries this Sunday. God bless you all. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Oscar.
God bless you too. Thank you very much for participating.
Thanks, everybody.
Good evening, everybody.
Thank you.
Take care.
God bless you.
Good job, everybody.
Bye-bye.
God bless.
Bye.
Peace out. Take care. God bless.
Bye, Oscar.
What's up,
Bye,
Tigre?
guys. Thank you.
Tigrito.
Ese es mi
Bye,
tigre.
Chris.
Bye,
Bye,
Oscar.
Chris.
everyone.
Bye,
Bye.
Bye, Oscar.
Bye. Bye, everyone. Take care. Stay safe.
Stay
Bye,
safe.
everyone.
Much love, everybody.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Is that Maria?
Yeah, bye.
Marco.
¡Épale! ¡Tigre!
Marco. Buenas tardes, Marco.
Buenas tardes, amigos. ¿Cómo están?
Bien, bien.
Estoy bien.
Señorita Gina.
We just get her picture. Gina.
¿Dónde estás, Gina?
Hey, Chris, I think that went well.
Hey, everybody.
Congratulations.
Good meeting.
That was a great format. I mean,
I guess I count the maximum of 61 people.
yeah. And there were a few people that were on early and then a few that came in later.
Yeah.
Let's say hi to Larry. Hey, Coach Larry, are you still there? No, Coach
No.
Larry. Larry was, is he your coach or Dylan's coach?
Who's Coach Larry? I don't know.
Voy a-
Salud y saludos a todos.
Saludos.
Gracias.
Adiós.
Saludos.
Adiós, adiós, adiós. Adiós. Adiós, 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 adiós. Adiós, adiós, adiós. Adiós,
Hasta
adiós.
pronto, no adiós, hasta pronto.
Hasta pronto, no adiós.